The morning air was cold as 15-year-old David stepped out of his mom's car in front of Riverside High School. He took a deep breath, adjusted his backpack, and looked up at the brick building that would be his new school. This was his fourth school in 6 years. His dad was in the military and moving around had become normal for their family. But that didn't make the first day any easier. David pulled open the heavy front doors and walked inside. The hallway was packed with students laughing, talking, and catching up after the weekend. But as he walked toward the main office, he noticed something. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. Eyes followed him. He was used to this by now. In this small suburban town, he stood out. The school was different from his last one in the city, where students came from all kinds of backgrounds. Here, everyone seemed to know everyone, and he was clearly the outsider. He kept his face calm and his shoulders relaxed as he made his way through the crowd. Years of moving had taught him not to show nervousness even when he felt it. What none of these staring students knew was that David wasn't just any new kid. For the past 8 years, he had been training in martial arts with his grandfather, a former national champion. David had earned his second-degree black belt in Taekwondo last year, and had been studying Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Muay Thai on top of that. But he never talked about it. His grandfather had taught him that real fighters don't need to announce themselves. The lady at the front desk handed him his class schedule and locker number with a polite smile. David thanked her and headed back into the hallway to find his locker. As he walked, he could still feel eyes on him. Small groups of students whispered to each other as he passed. A few girls giggled. Some guys sized him up with suspicious looks. David had been through this dance before. The first few weeks at a new school were always the hardest. After that, people usually got used to him and moved on. His morning classes went smoothly enough. Teachers introduced him to the class, and he gave the same short introduction he always did. His name, where he was from, and that his dad was in the military. Nothing more. He sat in the back when he could and kept to himself. A couple of students tried to make small talk, and he was polite but didn't push for friendship. He'd learned not to try too hard on the first day. Then came lunch. David grabbed a tray from the cafeteria line and scanned the crowded room for a place to sit. The tables were all claimed by established groups. Athletes sat together near the windows. The drama kids had their corner. The smart kids clustered near the vending machines. And right in the center of it all was a table that seemed to command attention. 5 guys sat there, all wearing Letterman jackets, all loud and confident in that way that said they ran this place. David spotted an empty table near the far wall and started walking toward it. He was halfway across the cafeteria when it happened. As he passed the center table, one of the guys in a Letterman jacket stuck his foot out right in David's path. David's shoe caught it and he stumbled forward. His tray tilted dangerously and his apple rolled off onto the floor. He managed to catch himself before falling completely, but the damage was done. The cafeteria erupted in laughter. Students at nearby tables pointed and snickered. The guys at the center table were laughing the hardest, slapping the table and each other's shoulders. David straightened up slowly, his tray still in his hands. He turned and looked at the guy who had tripped him. The kid was big, probably a football player with blonde hair and a smirk that suggested he'd done this kind of thing many times before. For just a second, their eyes met. David's face was completely calm, but something in his gaze made the blonde kid's smirk falter slightly. It wasn't a look of anger or fear. It was something else. Something steady and measured, like David was assessing him without any emotion at all. The moment passed quickly. David bent down, picked up his apple, and placed it back on his tray. He didn't say a word. He didn't glare or make a scene. He simply nodded once, almost like he was acknowledging what had happened, and walked away to the empty table by the wall. Behind him, the laughter continued, but it was a little less confident than before. The blonde kid, whose name was Ryan, watched David walk away with a confused expression. His friends were congratulating him, calling it a perfect welcome for the new kid. But Ryan couldn't shake the weird feeling he'd gotten from David's reaction. Most kids would have either gotten angry or looked embarrassed. Some would have said something back. Others would have looked down and hurried away. But David had done neither. He'd just looked at Ryan with those calm, steady eyes and walked away like it was nothing, like Ryan was nothing. "Yo, Ryan, you seeing this?" one of his friends said, nudging him. Kid didn't even react. What a weirdo. Ryan shook off the feeling and laughed along with his friends. "Yeah, total weirdo," he said. but in the back of his mind something bothered him about the new kid. He seemed different from the usual targets. Most new students either tried really hard to fit in or kept their heads down and hoped not to be noticed. David seemed to be doing neither. He was just existing, completely unbothered, like none of this affected him at all. David sat at his table and ate his lunch in silence. He watched the other students without staring, taking in the social dynamics of his new school. He spotted the center table with Ryan and his friends, clearly the popular athletes who thought they owned the place. He saw the kids who laughed along to stay on their good side. He saw the ones who looked relieved it wasn't them being picked on. He'd seen all these types before at other schools. What David didn't do was get angry. His grandfather had taught him better than that. The fool fights every battle, his grandfather always said. The wise man chooses his battles carefully, and the master avoids the battle altogether. David knew that reacting to Ryan would only make things worse. Bullies fed on reactions. They wanted anger, fear, or embarrassment. When they didn't get it, they either got bored and moved on or they escalated. David hoped for the first option but was prepared for the second. After lunch, David went to his afternoon classes. In English, a girl with dark hair and glasses smiled at him when he sat down in the empty desk next to her. "Don't worry about Ryan and those guys," she whispered. "They do that to everyone new. Just ignore them and they'll get bored." David appreciated the kindness and smiled back. "Thanks," he said quietly. "I'm David," the girl nodded. "I'm Lisa. Welcome to Riverside." The rest of the day passed without incident. David found his classes weren't too different from his old school, and the teachers seemed decent enough. When the final bell rang, he gathered his books and headed to his locker. As he walked through the hallway, he passed Ryan again. This time, Ryan's friend deliberately bumped into David's shoulder hard enough to make him step sideways. "Watch where you're going, new kid," the friend said with a laugh. Ryan and the others joined in the laughter as they walked past. David watched them go, his expression unchanged. He knew what was coming. This wasn't going to end with a tripped lunch tray. Ryan and his friends had marked him as a target, and they wouldn't stop until they'd either broken his spirit or gotten bored. David opened his locker, put his books inside, and pulled out his backpack. That evening at home, David went straight to the garage after finishing his homework. His grandfather had shipped his heavy bag to the new house before they'd even arrived. David wrapped his hands carefully, the ritual movements calming his mind. Then he began his training. Punches, kicks, knee strikes, elbows. Each technique was executed with perfect form, the result of thousands of hours of practice. His body moved like water, flowing from one position to the next without thinking. As he trained, David thought about his first day, about Ryan's foot tripping him, about the laughter, about the shoulder bump in the hallway. He thought about all of it while his fist struck the heavy bag with controlled power. Each strike could break bones if he wanted it to. Each kick could drop a grown man. But his grandfather had taught him that true strength wasn't about using your power. It was about having power and choosing not to use it. When the time comes, David thought, remembering his grandfather's words, "You'll know. Until then, stay calm, stay ready, and remember that the greatest victory is the fight you don't have to fight." David finished his training session an hour later, his body tired, but his mind clear. Tomorrow would bring more of the same, he knew. Ryan and his friends would keep testing him, keep pushing, waiting for him to crack. And David would keep doing what he always did. Stay calm, stay patient, and wait for the moment when he would have no choice but to show them who they were really dealing with. That moment, he knew, was coming soon. 2 weeks had passed since David's first day at Riverside High, and things had gotten worse instead of better. Ryan and his friends had made it their personal mission to make David's life miserable. It started small, the way these things always do. They'd knock books out of his hands in the hallway between classes. They'd make comments just loud enough for him to hear as he walked past. They'd laugh when he answered questions in class, even when he was right. David handled it the way his grandfather taught him. He stayed calm. He picked up his books without reacting. He ignored the comments. He kept his face neutral and his emotions in check. But his lack of reaction only seemed to frustrate Ryan more. Bullies wanted a response. They fed on fear or anger or embarrassment. When David gave them nothing, they just pushed harder. By the end of the first week, the harassment had spread beyond just Ryan and his core group. Other students, wanting to stay on Ryan's good side or just looking for entertainment, joined in. Someone started a rumor that David thought he was too good to talk to people. Another rumor claimed he'd been kicked out of his last school for starting fights. None of it was true, but truth didn't matter much in high school hallways. David's mom noticed he was quieter than usual at dinner. "How's school going, honey?" she asked one evening while they ate. David shrugged. "It's fine. Just adjusting." His mom studied his face for a moment, concern in her eyes. She knew moving was hard on him, but David had always been resilient. She decided to give him space to handle it his own way. If she'd known what was really happening, she might have intervened. But David didn't tell her. He'd dealt with bullies before at other schools, and he always handled it himself. What his mom didn't see was how David spent his evenings. After finishing his homework, he'd go out to the garage and train for 2 hours straight. He'd work through his forms, each movement precise and controlled. He'd strike the heavy bag until his knuckles ached. He'd practice his kicks until his legs burned. The training wasn't just physical. It was meditation. It was how he processed everything that happened during the day without letting it turn into anger or fear. His grandfather called every few days to check in. "How's the new school treating you?" he asked during one call. David hesitated. His grandfather could always tell when he was holding something back. "There's some kids giving me a hard time," David admitted. "Nothing I can't handle." His grandfather was quiet for a moment. "Remember what I taught you, David. Your training isn't for proving yourself. It's for protecting yourself and others when there's no other choice. The strongest person in the room is often the quietest one." "I know, Grandpa," David said. "I'm staying out of it. I'm not looking for trouble." His grandfather's voice was warm but firm. "I know you're not. But trouble has a way of finding people sometimes. When it does, you trust your training, not just the physical part. The mental part too. Stay calm, stay aware, and always give people a way out. That's what separates a fighter from a warrior." The situation at school escalated during the second week. David had been assigned as lab partners with a girl named Jenny in chemistry class. Jenny was smart, friendly, and well-liked by everyone. She'd been one of the few students who was genuinely nice to David from the beginning, treating him like a normal person instead of an outsider or a target. They worked well together in class, and David was grateful to have at least one person he could talk to without feeling like he was being judged. Ryan noticed. He'd been trying to get Jenny's attention for months, asking her to parties and trying to sit near her at lunch. She'd always been polite but distant with him, clearly not interested. Now here was the new kid, the one Ryan had been making miserable, laughing and talking easily with Jenny during their lab work. To Ryan, this wasn't just annoying. It was a direct challenge to his status in the school. On Friday afternoon, as David walked toward the student parking lot where his mom was picking him up, he heard footsteps behind him. He didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Ryan's voice called out, "Hey, new kid, wait up." David kept walking, but Ryan and 3 of his friends quickly caught up and moved to surround him. David stopped walking and turned to face them, his backpack still over one shoulder. Ryan stepped closer, his face showing that fake, friendly expression that bullies use right before they make their move. "We need to talk," Ryan said. "You think you're special or something? Coming into our school, talking to our girls?" David kept his expression neutral. His body had already shifted into a ready stance without him thinking about it. His weight balanced, his center of gravity low. Years of training made it automatic, but the movement was so subtle that Ryan and his friends didn't even notice. "I'm not looking for trouble," David said quietly. His voice was calm but carried a weight that made one of Ryan's friends glance at the others uncertainly. Ryan laughed, but it sounded forced. "You hear that, guys? He's not looking for trouble." Ryan shoved David backward. It wasn't hard enough to knock him down, but it was meant to intimidate. David absorbed the push easily, his body staying balanced. He could have countered it without thinking. His training had prepared him for exactly this kind of situation, but he held back. Tyler, one of Ryan's friends, grabbed David's backpack and yanked it off his shoulder. Before David could react, Tyler threw it into a large, muddy puddle near the parking lot entrance. David's textbooks and notebooks were inside. He watched the backpack land in the mud, and for the first time since this all started, he felt his control begin to slip. Not into fear, into something else. Into the fighting instinct his grandfather had spent years teaching him to control. More students were gathering now, forming a loose circle around them. David could see phones coming out, students ready to record whatever was about to happen. They expected to see the new kid get humiliated. Some of them probably felt bad for him but wouldn't intervene. That's how it always worked. Nobody wanted to become the next target. Brad and Connor, Ryan's other two friends, moved to tighten the circle. David was boxed in now. He scanned the situation with the tactical awareness his training had given him. 4 opponents, all bigger than him. Ryan was directly in front, about 6 feet away. Tyler to his right, Brad and Connor blocking his left and back. The crowd created a barrier. He could break through if he needed to, but that would mean fighting his way out. And he still hoped it wouldn't come to that. "I don't want any trouble," David repeated, but this time his voice had changed. It was still quiet, but there was an edge to it now, something cold and focused. A few students in the crowd noticed the change and stopped laughing. Lisa, the girl who'd welcomed him on his first day, looked worried. "Come on, Ryan, just leave him alone," she called out. Ryan ignored her. "You think you can just come here and take whatever you want?" Ryan said, stepping even closer. "Talk to whoever you want? You need to learn how this school works." He pushed David again, harder this time. David's body moved automatically, redirecting the force so smoothly that Ryan barely noticed. But David was running calculations in his head. How much longer could he defuse this? How far would Ryan push? When would he have no choice but to defend himself? "Walk away, Ryan," David said. His breathing was completely steady, controlled through years of meditation and training. Inside, he could feel the familiar state of heightened awareness washing over him. Time seemed to slow down slightly. He noticed everything: the angle of Ryan's shoulders, the way Tyler was bouncing on his feet nervously, the fact that Connor kept glancing at the growing crowd, maybe having second thoughts. His grandfather's voice echoed in his mind. "In a real fight, you see everything. You feel everything, and you respond with exactly as much force as necessary. Not more, not less." Ryan must have sensed something in David's demeanor because he hesitated for just a second. But his friends were watching. The whole school was watching. He'd gone too far to back down now without looking weak. His pride wouldn't let him. "Last chance," David said quietly. "Walk away, please." The word "please" surprised some of the onlookers. Who begs their bully to stop when they're surrounded? Ryan misread it as weakness. He interpreted David's calm as fear, his request to walk away as begging. It was the biggest mistake Ryan would ever make. "You're pathetic," Ryan sneered. Then he drew back his fist and threw a punch directly at David's face. The crowd gasped. Phones recorded, and in that moment everything changed. David's head moved just slightly to the left. The punch sailed past his ear, missing by inches. Ryan's momentum carried him forward off balance. The look of shock on Ryan's face would have been funny if the situation weren't so serious. He'd expected to connect. He'd expected David to either take the hit or clumsily try to block it. He hadn't expected David to move like that with such precision and control. David didn't counter-strike. Not yet. He simply stepped to the side and let Ryan stumble past him. "Don't do this," David said one more time. His voice was barely above a whisper, but in the sudden silence of the parking lot, everyone heard it. The crowd had gone quiet. This wasn't going the way anyone expected. Ryan spun around, his face red with embarrassment and rage. His friends looked uncertain now. They'd seen what the crowd had seen. The new kid had just made Ryan miss a punch that should have been easy to land. Everything seemed to move in slow motion. Ryan charged at David with his fists raised, his face twisted with anger. Tyler came from the right side, Brad from the left, and Connor circled around trying to get behind him. The crowd of students had their phones up, recording what they thought would be 4 guys beating up the new kid. Nobody expected what was about to happen. David's training kicked in like muscle memory. He didn't think about his moves. He just flowed. As Ryan threw another wild punch, David stepped to the side with minimal movement. Just enough. Ryan's fist cut through empty air where David's head had been a split second before. Using Ryan's own momentum against him, David wrapped his arm around Ryan's extended arm, stepped behind him, and executed a perfect hip throw. It was a basic technique he'd practiced thousands of times. Ryan's body went up and over David's hip, and then Ryan was on the ground, flat on his back. The impact knocked the wind out of Ryan. He lay there gasping, trying to figure out what just happened. David hadn't slammed him hard. He'd controlled the throw so Ryan wouldn't get hurt, but Ryan was completely down, unable to move for a moment. The crowd gasped. Phones captured everything. Tyler saw his friend go down and rushed in without thinking. He swung a punch at David's head. David ducked smoothly under it, dropping his center of gravity. As Tyler's punch missed, David swept his leg low, catching Tyler right at the ankles. It was a Muay Thai sweep, perfectly timed. Tyler's feet went out from under him, and he crashed onto the pavement. Not hard enough to injure him, but hard enough to take him out of the fight. 2 down in less than 10 seconds. Brad and Connor both hesitated. This wasn't what they'd signed up for. They'd expected to help rough up some new kid who couldn't defend himself. They hadn't expected this. But they were committed now, and the whole school was watching. They looked at each other, nodded, and both rushed David at the same time from different angles. David saw them coming. His grandfather's training had prepared him for multiple attackers. He'd sparred against 3 and 4 people at once in the dojo. The key was never to let them surround you. Keep moving. Use one opponent as a shield against the others. Stay calm and pick your moments. Connor reached him first, throwing a wild haymaker. David blocked it with his forearm, the impact barely registering. In the same motion, he delivered a controlled palm strike to Connor's chest. Not a punch. A push with his palm, using Connor's own forward momentum. Connor stumbled backward, gasping for air, and fell onto his backside. He wasn't hurt, just shocked and winded. Brad was right behind Connor. He tried to grab David in a bear hug, probably hoping to hold him so the others could get up and help. David saw it coming. As Brad's arms came forward, David grabbed Brad's wrist, turned his body, and used a simple Aikido redirection technique. He guided Brad's momentum forward and down, sending him face first into the grass beside the parking lot. Brad landed with a grunt, more embarrassed than injured. The entire confrontation had lasted maybe 30 seconds. Ryan and his 3 friends were all on the ground. David stood in the center of the circle, breathing normally, not even winded. His school hoodie wasn't even wrinkled. The crowd was completely silent except for the sound of phones recording. Nobody could believe what they'd just witnessed. David looked down at Ryan, who was still on the ground trying to catch his breath. David's face showed no anger, no pride, no excitement, just that same calm expression he always had. He walked over to Ryan and extended his hand. "You okay?" he asked. His voice was genuine, concerned even. He wasn't gloating. He wasn't rubbing it in. He actually wanted to know if Ryan was hurt. Ryan stared up at him in complete disbelief. His mind was trying to process what had just happened. He'd been so sure of himself, so confident. He was bigger than David. He had 3 friends backing him up. They'd cornered the new kid with no way out. And somehow, in less than a minute, all 4 of them were on the ground, and David was standing there asking if he was okay. Before Ryan could respond, a voice cut through the silence. "What is going on here?" Mr. Peterson, the vice principal, came running from the school building. Someone must have told him there was a fight in the parking lot. He pushed through the crowd of students, his face stern and ready to hand out suspensions. David lowered his hand and stepped back. He didn't try to run or hide. He just stood there calmly, waiting. Ryan slowly got to his feet, his face red from embarrassment more than exertion. Tyler, Brad, and Connor also stood up, looking at each other in confusion. The crowd of students started talking all at once, everyone trying to explain what happened. Mr. Peterson held up his hand for silence. "I don't want to hear it from all of you at once. Someone show me what happened." Immediately, a dozen students held up their phones. They'd all recorded the whole thing. Mr. Peterson took the nearest phone and pressed play. His expression changed as he watched the video. His stern look shifted to surprise, then to something that might have been amazement. The video showed everything clearly. Ryan and his friends surrounding David, the shoves, David asking them to walk away multiple times, Ryan throwing the first punch, and then David defending himself with techniques that looked more like a martial arts demonstration than a street fight. The video showed David's control, how he'd taken each of them down without actually hurting anyone. How he'd offered to help Ryan up afterward. Mr. Peterson watched the video twice, then he looked at David with new eyes. "You," he said, pointing at David. "My office. Now." Then he turned to Ryan and his friends. "You 4 as well. Everyone else get out of here. Show's over." The crowd dispersed slowly, students still whispering and looking back at David with a mixture of shock and respect. The walk to the principal's office was quiet and tense. Ryan and his friends walked ahead, not looking at each other or at David. David walked behind them with Mr. Peterson. The vice principal kept glancing at David like he was trying to figure out a puzzle. They reached the main office, and Mr. Peterson directed them all to sit in chairs lined up against the wall outside the principal's office. "Wait here," Mr. Peterson said, then disappeared into the office. David could hear him talking to Dr. Martinez, the principal, through the door. He couldn't make out the words, but the tone was serious. After a few minutes, Mr. Peterson came back out. "David, we need to call your mother." "What's her number?" David gave him the number, and Mr. Peterson made the call. David heard him explain that there had been an incident, that David was okay, but that she needed to come to the school. His mom's voice on the other end sounded worried and confused. Mr. Peterson assured her that David wasn't in serious trouble, but that they needed to discuss what had happened. 20 minutes later, David's mom rushed into the office. She saw David sitting calmly in the chair and immediately went to him. "Are you hurt? What happened?" David shook his head. "I'm fine, Mom. There was a fight, but I'm okay." She looked him over carefully, checking for injuries, then turned to Mr. Peterson with a mixture of worry and anger. "Can someone please explain what's going on?" Dr. Martinez came out of her office then, a tablet in her hand. "Mrs. Chen, thank you for coming so quickly. Please come into my office." "David, you too." They went into the principal's office, leaving Ryan and his friends sitting outside. Dr. Martinez sat behind her desk and turned the tablet toward them. "Before we talk, I need you to watch this." She played the video from the parking lot. David's mom watched with growing concern, her hand covering her mouth. She saw her son surrounded by 4 bigger boys. She saw the shoves, heard David asking them to walk away. Then she saw the punch and everything that followed. When the video ended, she looked at David with wide eyes. "Where did you learn to do that?" "Grandpa," David said simply. "He's been teaching me since I was 7. His mom knew about the training, of course. She'd driven him to the dojo countless times over the years, but she'd never actually seen him in a real situation. She'd never seen him use his skills outside of practice. Watching that video, she realized her quiet, calm son was capable of things she'd never fully understood. Dr. Martinez leaned forward. "Mrs. Chen, I've also reviewed reports from other students about the past 2 weeks. Multiple students have come forward to tell us that your son has been harassed, bullied, and targeted by these boys since his first day here. David never reported any of it. He never fought back. Until today, when he had no other choice." She pulled up more videos on the tablet, these ones from hallways and the cafeteria, footage of David's books being knocked down, of him being shoved, of the lunch tray incident on his first day. "This has been going on for 2 weeks, Dr. Martinez continued. And from what I can see, your son showed remarkable restraint. Even in the parking lot, he only defended himself. He didn't attack. He didn't try to hurt anyone. He just protected himself." David's mom looked at her son with a mixture of pride and sadness. Pride that he'd handled himself so well. Sadness that he'd been going through this and hadn't told her. "Why didn't you say anything?" she asked quietly. David shrugged. "I thought I could handle it. I didn't want to worry you. And I kept hoping they'd just get bored and leave me alone." Dr. Martinez nodded. "That's common with bullying victims. They often don't report it because they're afraid it will make things worse." David woke up the next morning to dozens of text messages from numbers he didn't recognize. Somehow, people had gotten his contact information and were sending him messages about the video. Some were supportive, telling him he did the right thing. Others were asking if he could teach them to fight. A few were asking if the video was real or staged. He scrolled through them while eating breakfast, feeling overwhelmed by the sudden attention. His mom drove him to school that morning. Before he got out of the car, she turned to him with a serious expression. "Today is going to be different," she said. "People are going to treat you differently now. Some will want to be your friend just because of what they saw. Others might be scared of you. Just remember who you are, and why your grandfather taught you those skills. Not for attention or popularity. For discipline and protection." David nodded. "I know, Mom. I'll be fine." But as he walked through the school's front doors, he realized his mom was right. The hallway fell quiet as he passed. Students stopped their conversations and watched him. Some whispered to their friends. Others pulled out their phones like they wanted to record him just walking to his locker. It was uncomfortable in a completely different way than being bullied had been. When he reached his locker, he found a group of guys waiting for him. They weren't Ryan's friends. They were from the wrestling team and the martial arts club. "Hey man, that was incredible yesterday," one of them said. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" David opened his locker and started putting his books away. My grandfather taught me. I've been training since I was 7. The wrestling team captain, a senior named Mike, stepped forward. Listen, you should join our team, or the martial arts club. Coach has been trying to get more people interested in the combat sports program. With skills like yours, you could compete at state level easy. David appreciated the offer but shook his head. I'll think about it. Thanks, though. In his first period class, his English teacher, Mrs. Roberts, gave him a small smile as he entered. Lisa, the girl who had been kind to him from the beginning, waved him over to sit next to her. You're like a celebrity now, she whispered as he sat down. Everyone's talking about you. David felt his face get warm. I didn't want any of this attention. I just wanted to be left alone. Lisa nodded sympathetically. I know. But at least Ryan and his friends will leave you alone now. Actually, they'll probably leave everyone alone for a while. You did the whole school a favor whether you meant to or not. David hadn't thought about it that way. He'd been so focused on his own situation that he hadn't considered how many other students Ryan and his crew had probably bullied over the years. The morning passed in a blur of stares and whispers. In chemistry class, Jenny smiled at him as he sat down at their lab table. That was brave, what you did, she said quietly. Those guys have been terrorizing people since freshman year. Nobody ever stood up to them. David started setting up their experiment. I didn't really have a choice. They cornered me. Jenny leaned closer, her voice low so only he could hear. Ryan asked me out like 5 times. I always said no because he was such a jerk to people. After what you did yesterday, maybe he'll learn that being a bully doesn't make you tough. It just makes you a bully. David appreciated her words but stayed focused on the experiment. He still wasn't comfortable with all the attention. Lunchtime was the strangest experience. David grabbed his tray and headed to the table where he'd been sitting alone for the past 2 weeks. But before he could sit down, several students called out to him. David, sit with us! He looked around and saw friendly faces at multiple tables, all inviting him over. It was surreal. 2 weeks ago, nobody wanted anything to do with him. Now everyone wanted to be near him. He ended up sitting with Lisa and some of her friends from the newspaper and art club. They were genuinely nice and didn't just want to talk about the fight. They asked him about his old school, his interests, and what it was like moving around so much. For the first time since arriving at Riverside High, David felt like he was having a normal conversation with people his age. During lunch, he noticed Ryan and his friends sitting at their usual center table. But things were different. The table that used to be crowded with people trying to be near the popular kids was half empty. Ryan sat there with Tyler, Brad, and Connor, but they were all quiet, not their usual loud and boisterous selves. Other students walked past their table without stopping to talk. The social hierarchy had shifted overnight. Ryan caught David looking, and their eyes met across the cafeteria. David expected to see anger or resentment, but what he saw instead was something more complicated. Ryan looked embarrassed and maybe a little lost, like he didn't know what his role was supposed to be anymore. David felt an unexpected wave of sympathy. He knew what it was like to feel out of place. After school, David went to the gym to finally retrieve his backpack from the lost and found where someone had turned it in after the fight. His books were muddy and some pages were damaged, but everything was there. As he was leaving the building, he heard a voice behind him. Hey, wait up. David turned to see Ryan standing alone in the hallway. No friends backing him up this time. No crowd to perform for. Just Ryan looking uncomfortable and uncertain. David waited, his body automatically tensing even though he didn't think Ryan was going to try anything. The hall was empty except for the two of them. Ryan shifted his weight from foot to foot, clearly struggling with what he wanted to say. Look, I don't really know how to do this, he started. I've never had to apologize for anything before. But what I did to you, what we did, for the past 2 weeks and especially yesterday, that was messed up. I'm sorry. David studied Ryan's face, looking for signs that this was a trick or a setup. But Ryan's discomfort seemed genuine. Why? David asked simply. Why did you target me from the first day? Ryan ran his hand through his hair and let out a long breath. Honestly? Because you were new and different and I thought it would be easy. I thought you'd either try to kiss up to me to fit in, or you'd just take it and be an easy target. When you didn't react either way, it just made me push harder. I was being an idiot. There was silence for a moment. David could feel the anger he'd been suppressing for 2 weeks wanting to come out. The frustration of being harassed, mocked, and isolated. But he also remembered his grandfather's teachings about forgiveness and second chances. "That's not really an explanation," David said. "Why do you feel like you need to push people around at all?" Ryan looked surprised by the question, like nobody had ever asked him that before. "I don't know," he said finally. "It's just what I've always done. My older brother was like that when he went here. My dad pushes people around at his job. I guess I thought that's just how you're supposed to be if you want people to respect you." He laughed bitterly. "Turns out respect and fear aren't the same thing. I learned that pretty fast after that video went viral." David adjusted his backpack. "You're right. They're not the same thing. People feared you, but they didn't respect you, and now they don't do either." Ryan flinched at the harsh truth but didn't argue. "Is there any way to fix that?" he asked quietly. David thought about it. Maybe. But it's not going to be easy and it's not going to be fast. You spent years building a reputation as a bully. Changing that is going to take real work. Ryan nodded slowly. "I get that. But I want to try. That video, seeing myself like that, how I looked when I was coming at you with my friends like some kind of gang, it was embarrassing. I don't want to be that person anymore." An idea started forming in David's mind. It was risky, and maybe foolish, but his grandfather had always taught him that martial arts was about building character, not just fighting skills. "I train every day after school," David said. "In my garage. If you're serious about changing, about learning some discipline and control, you can come train with me. But I'm warning you now, it's going to be hard. Harder than football practice. And I won't go easy on you just because you apologized." Ryan's eyes widened in surprise. "You'd do that? After everything I did to you?" David shrugged. "My grandfather always says that everyone deserves a chance to become better than they were. This is yours. But if you waste it, if you go back to your old ways, we're done." "Understood?" Ryan nodded quickly. "Understood. When do we start?" "Tomorrow. Right after school. Bring running shoes and be ready to work." David turned to leave, then stopped and looked back. "And Ryan? The apology means something. But actions mean more. Show me you're serious, don't just tell me." Ryan smiled for the first time, a real smile that wasn't mocking or cruel. "I will. I promise." As David walked out to meet his mom in the parking lot, he felt lighter somehow. The anger he'd been carrying had lessened. He didn't know if Ryan would actually show up tomorrow, or if this attempt at redemption would work out. But he'd given him a chance, which is all anyone could ask for. His mom noticed his mood when he got in the car. "Good day?" she asked. David thought about the stares, the attention, the conversation with Ryan, and nodded. "Yeah, Mom. Actually, it was a pretty good day." As they drove home, David looked out the window and allowed himself a small smile. Maybe things at Riverside High were going to work out after all. 3 months had passed since that day in the parking lot, and Riverside High felt like a completely different school. David stood in the gym watching his martial arts class go through their warm-up drills. 25 students were lined up in rows, following his instructions. Some were beginners who'd never thrown a punch before. Others, like the wrestling team members, brought their own experience. And right in the front row, working harder than anyone else, was Ryan. The transformation in Ryan had been remarkable. That first day when he showed up at David's garage, David had pushed him harder than he'd ever been pushed before. They ran 3 miles before even starting the actual training. Then David put him through basic stances, having Ryan hold positions until his legs shook. Ryan had wanted to quit after 20 minutes. His face was red, he was breathing hard, and his pride was taking a beating. But he didn't quit. He stuck it out for the full 2-hour session. The next day, Ryan could barely walk. His muscles ached in places he didn't know he had muscles. But he showed up again, and the day after that, and the day after that. David never went easy on him. In fact, he was harder on Ryan than he was on himself during training. But Ryan never complained. He just worked. The change wasn't just physical. David taught Ryan the same lessons his grandfather had taught him. Before each session, they would sit quietly for 5 minutes, focusing on their breathing and clearing their minds. At first, Ryan thought it was stupid, but gradually he began to understand. The meditation wasn't about sitting still. It was about learning to control your thoughts and emotions, about finding calm in the middle of chaos. Martial arts isn't about fighting, David explained one evening while they worked on blocks and counters. It's about discipline, about knowing you have power and choosing not to use it unless you absolutely have to. Anyone can throw a punch when they're angry. It takes real strength to walk away. Ryan absorbed these lessons like a sponge. The more he trained, the more he understood how little he'd actually known about real strength. The change in Ryan affected his friendships too. Tyler, Brad, and Connor had watched their friend transform with confusion and eventually distance. They didn't understand why Ryan was spending all his time with the kid they'd bullied. They thought he was being weak, letting David control him. When they confronted Ryan about it, he simply said, "You don't get it. This isn't about David beating me. It's about me becoming better than I was." His old friends drifted away, but Ryan didn't seem to mind. He'd started to realize that those friendships had been built on being mean to others and acting tough. Once he stopped doing those things, there wasn't anything holding them together. It hurt at first, losing people he'd known for years. But David reminded him that real friends don't leave when you try to improve yourself. David's influence spread beyond just Ryan. The school's martial arts club, which had been dying with only 4 members, suddenly had a waiting list. Students who'd been bullied or felt unsafe wanted to learn what David knew. Athletes wanted to improve their performance. Even some teachers asked if they could observe the classes. The principal, Dr. Martinez, was so impressed that she gave them access to the school gym twice a week for training. David didn't just teach fighting techniques. He taught confidence to kids who'd been picked on their whole lives. He taught humility to athletes who thought being good at sports made them better than others. He taught control to students who had anger issues. His grandfather's lessons became their lessons. And slowly the culture of the school began to shift. Jenny, his chemistry partner, had joined the class too. She wasn't interested in fighting, but she'd been harassed by guys at school for years and wanted to learn to defend herself. David taught her practical self-defense moves, the kind that would work in real situations. More importantly, he taught her to carry herself with confidence. Most bullies look for easy targets, he explained. If you walk with confidence and awareness, you're already less likely to be bothered. One afternoon, about 2 months into the program, something happened that proved how much things had changed. A new student, a freshman named Kevin, was being cornered by some older kids in the hallway. They were going through the usual bully routine, calling him names and knocking his books down. In the old Riverside High, students would have walked past not wanting to get involved. But this wasn't the old school anymore. Ryan saw it happening and walked over. The older kids recognized him, remembered who he used to be. "What do you want, Ryan?" one of them asked. "Want to join in?" Ryan stood between them and Kevin, his posture relaxed but firm. "No, I want you to leave him alone." The bullies laughed. "Since when do you care?" Ryan's voice was calm, just like David had taught him. "Since I realized that picking on people doesn't make you strong. It makes you weak. Walk away." Something in Ryan's tone and his controlled demeanor made the older kids hesitate. This wasn't the Ryan they used to know. This wasn't someone looking for a fight. This was someone who was genuinely trying to help. They looked at each other, muttered something about it not being worth it, and left. Ryan helped Kevin pick up his books. "You okay?" he asked. Kevin nodded, looking stunned. "Thanks. I didn't think anyone would help." Ryan smiled. "Things are different now. And if anyone bothers you again, come find me or David. We've got your back." When Ryan told David about the incident later, David felt proud. Not of himself, but of Ryan. This was what martial arts was really about. Not the fighting in the parking lot that everyone remembered, but this, standing up for someone weaker, using your presence and confidence to prevent violence instead of starting it. The school year was coming to an end when Dr. Martinez called an assembly. She stood at the podium looking out at the students with a smile. "This year has been remarkable," she began. "At the start of the year, we had serious problems with bullying and harassment. Our numbers showed that it was one of the biggest issues affecting student well-being and performance. But something changed." She pulled up statistics on the screen behind her. "Reports of bullying are down 70% from last year. Student surveys show that more of you feel safe at school than ever before. Academic performance is up, and I believe a large part of that is due to one student who came to our school and showed us what real strength looks like." David, sitting in the audience, felt his face get hot as Dr. Martinez talked about him. She told the story of how he'd endured harassment without retaliation, how he'd defended himself with control and restraint, and how he'd turned his skills into a program that helped others. Because of David's example and his willingness to teach others, we're creating a permanent award. The David Chen Award for Character and Courage will be given each year to a student who demonstrates both strength and compassion. The auditorium erupted in applause. Students stood up, clapping and cheering. David wanted to disappear into his seat, but his friends around him were patting his back and congratulating him. When the noise finally died down, Dr. Martinez held up her hand. But David isn't the only one who deserves recognition. There's another student whose transformation has been equally inspiring. She called Ryan up to the stage. He walked up looking nervous. Nothing like the confident bully he'd been at the start of the year. Ryan made mistakes, Dr. Martinez said honestly. He hurt people and created a culture of fear. But when given the chance to change, he took it. He worked harder than anyone to become better. And now he stands up for others instead of putting them down. That kind of change takes real courage. She announced that Ryan would be co-teaching the martial arts program with David next year. The applause this time was mixed. Some students cheered enthusiastically. Others were more reserved, still remembering who Ryan used to be. But it was progress. Ryan understood that earning back trust would take time. He was okay with that. After the assembly, David's grandfather called. He'd been following his grandson's progress through their regular conversations. "I'm proud of you," he said, his voice warm. "You've done exactly what I always hoped you would. You've used your training not to hurt people, but to help them. That's the mark of a true martial artist." David sat in his room that evening, thinking about how much had changed since that first day when he walked through Riverside High's doors. He'd come here expecting to keep his head down, stay invisible, and survive another school year. Instead, he'd been forced to show who he really was. And in doing so, he'd changed not just his own life, but the lives of dozens of other students. Ryan sent him a text that night. "Thanks for giving me a chance when I didn't deserve one. You changed my life, man. For real." David smiled and typed back, "You changed your own life. I just showed you how. See you Monday for training." As David prepared for bed, he looked at the photo on his desk of him and his grandfather at his black belt ceremony. His grandfather had told him that day that the belt wasn't the end of his training, but the beginning. That the real test would be how he used his skills in the world outside the dojo. David finally understood what he meant. The next school year would bring new challenges. There would always be students who needed help, who needed to learn confidence and self-control. There would be setbacks and difficulties. But David wasn't worried. He'd learned something important over the past year.